Too many companies chase shiny IT objects. They never build a business case, and as a result, they struggle to deliver meaningful change and innovation in their businesses, particularly when it comes to cloud. Having invested in the wrong cloud technology, they waste both time and money, customer and staff goodwill. But there is a better way, and today you will hear it. Hello, everybody. Today we have a special guest, Brian McCumber, who is a FinOps cloud expert. Brian, welcome. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit more about yourself, sir?
Yeah. Hi, Kieran. Thanks for having me on the show. And just to give the audience a bit of an introduction about myself, I've been a techie at heart and an entrepreneur over 20 years, ever since the dot-com boom. And I've been a full stack developer from front to back, data architecture, performance, solution architecture. And over the recent years, I've been focused primarily on FinOps, the discipline of FinOps. And I think we'll probably talk about that today. I've worked with big firms like Ernst and Young and Accenture for many years, and then I've also operated as an independent consultant, and I've partnered with like boutique consulting firms and so on. And some other tidbits about myself is that I run a podcast as well. Tech Money Talks, have about 11,000 subscribers there. I created a Udemy course and then even published recently a first book called FinOps for Power BI, which is going pretty good. And then other things about me is more about like creating e-commerce stores. So I've done multiple six-figure e-commerce stores and have what I like to call like digital assets of what I do. So kind of a wide range of things that I like to touch on here.
So you're not bored.
Yeah.
Well, let's try and tie you down a little bit today on cloud. So, Brian, we hear a lot about cloud, multi-hybrid cloud, private cloud, and every other variation and flavor that there is. What are the differences between each of the cloud types? What are the key strategic and probably tactical reasons behind the adoption of different strategies? Single cloud, multi-hybrid cloud, and everything else in between. Give us a little bit more detail, sir, and a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like to view the adoption of cloud as a journey, and meaning that there's a cycle for enterprises to go through when adopting cloud or having a major cloud migration. Fortunately, like I've been a part of multiple large scale enterprise cloud migration efforts, and there's multiple phases in going through. So like if organizations are in that planning phase, you're typically looking at like total cost of ownership, doing some app rationalization, looking to plan, okay, what's going to be that approach? And it's typically a multi-phase, in some cases, a multi-year approach to actually go through that journey. And when it comes to deciding about like if it's single cloud or multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, those are decisions that enterprise organizations are looking to make. I know that from a cloud service provider perspective, that organizations or CSP providers are typically looking to have you host on their platform primarily. So if you ask someone from AWS, they're going to want you to be on AWS and so on. But for enterprises, the reality is that almost organically, multi-cloud kind of seeps in, through mergers and acquisitions or things like that. Like, so from my view, like one of the things that I usually say is to at least be prepared to handle a multi-cloud environment. Because even though you might primarily pick one particular platform, like Azure, GCP, or AWS, the reality is that you will get a certain percentage of applications that come in that are running on different cloud platforms, and just the speed at which things are going right now, that it's a reality that happens for most organizations. So from my view, I feel like it's better to be prepared for a multi-cloud scenario.
So what's the best strategy then to get value from any investment in a multi-cloud strategy? And by that, I want to be clear, we're not just talking about cost, but we're talking about operational efficiency as well.
Yeah. So I mean, related to that, I mean, one of the initial things is having a good understanding of your own footprint and landscape, and if you're just starting out, then yeah, understanding your total cost of ownership is key. But also, there's other like fundamental things that you need to get set up. One of the things that is typically recommended is establishing what's called a cloud center of excellence, or a CCOE. The establishment of the CCOE comes in multiple facets. But basically, you're establishing what's called like a target operating model. How are you going to operate with your organization within the cloud? And then also along with the CCOE, that's where the adoption of a FinOps practice, like I would recommend, the FinOps practice usually resides within the CCOE org structure. And so when it comes to like organizational alignment, that would be one of the first key things to like get established. And then from that, if you're trying to get value out of this, this is where the importance of having what's called OKRs. Key results that you're identifying, KPIs, or understanding what I like to call your North Star metrics. What's gonna tie things when what you're spending in the cloud to business value. And one of the terms that I actually highlighted in the book that released. It's called ROCKS, and it's an acronym that stands for Return on Cloud Spend. So return on cloud spend, I call it ROCKS, and the story behind that, which is actually pretty cool. Like I said, my background, I've done a lot of e-commerce and online business. There's an acronym in that industry that's called your ROAS, and that stands for return on ad spend. So I know if I have like a $4 ROAS, then I know for every dollar I spend on advertising, I'm getting $4 back. So, if I know that metric, that KPI, then I know that okay, I'm going to make that deal as many times as I can. When it comes to the cloud, most organizations, and this is where you get to like unit economics and cloud economics, which is like, okay, what's your return on cloud spend? How can we tie that to business value? How do I know that every dollar I spend in the cloud, what kind of value are we getting back? And it organizations to be able to achieve that, I think that's what most organizations are looking to achieve in their FinOps adoption. And one of the things that I like to touch on, which is like, the same way that I mentioned the adoption of cloud is a journey, the adoption of FinOps is a journey as well. Optimizing and getting value is not just a one-time event, and there's a maturity level when you begin to adopt like a FinOps practice. So having that type of like understanding within your enterprise, what's your return on cloud spend? It's one of those like target states that an enterprise would want to get to, but there's a lot of fundamental things that you have to get in place first before you can reach there. But yeah, that's definitely one of the key ways, which is what I call rocks, your return on cloud spend.
Well, you mentioned what I believe are some of those fundamental rocks a moment ago, and you're mentioning something called FinOps, and then there's also something called AIOps. Would you mind explaining what is FinOps and what is AIOps, and what are companies trying to achieve by putting both of those practices into their cloud center of expertise?
Yeah, for sure. So, FinOps is really a discipline that's formed over the past few years. It's really related to other terms have been called like cloud financial management, and really the history behind it is taking finance and DevOps and combining that together. The idea of FinOps is about connecting all the key stakeholders from the finance side or procurement or business, and connecting that with the technology side. So you got engineering, you got operations, and so on. So it's like really making that connection. And when it comes to AI ops, so is more like artificial intelligence to help automate like IT operations. so operational efficiency. So when it comes to AIOps, there's definitely synergy between FinOps and AIOps. It's in that space of operations, and AIOps will have those abilities to implement those automations to now get things as far as, if it's incident management or different things, but a way to react, a way to adjust, and probably some use case scenarios where they might overlap is where, there might be some recommendations that come from the FinOps side of things, as opposed to, let's right size, some of these cloud resources, or let's begin to decommission maybe some unused resources or different things like that. It may eventually make its way into like a change request or some type of operations that needs to take place, and that's where like the intersection and that cross functional capability comes into play.
Interesting. I kind of like FinOps. I love the transparency, and particularly if we can get finance, IT, and the business all on the same page and agreeing as to what is creating value and what's not. And then to your point, if we can optimize the environment, I think very often that's the distinction. People want to cut cost, but this is also about freeing dollars up to put it in the right place to allow you to get benefit. Overinvest, you waste money. Underinvest, you waste performance. And when you can get to that very good and very mature state, if you then put the automation around the edges of that, then you keep a very refined environment that you know is delivering what you needed to deliver 24/7. And that's a good thing, because I also don't think, and this is in kindness to IT professionals and cloud professionals, that we can keep up anymore with the demands of multi-cloud, multi-hybrid environments and everything that is being chucked at us today. Brian, one of those things, a key challenge around securing hybrid multi-cloud is the increasing growth of data sovereignty, taking more and more into cloud thinking and more into cloud planning. All countries, lots of regions, European acts, Californian data rules, India country data rules. All these things are placing workloads and organizations to be more regional cloud suppliers, if I'm pronouncing that correctly or saying it right. That can lead to a variety of new complications, new pitfalls, and new challenges when it comes to transparency and performance. What's your experience of those, Brian, and what's your recommendation for companies trying to cope with all these new data legislation rules?
Yeah, I mean, just the whole, foundation of having a proper data strategy is key. So, I mean, there's so many things to consider here. One which is what you just mentioned, handling data within different regions. There's security. There's also one of the things that I've noticed that organizations overlook is really having a well thought out and implemented like data lifecycle management plan. So, really thinking through as far as, okay, what, everything should not just be sitting in your active data storage, costing the most amount of money that you have when you got like, 7 years worth. So there should, as a first step, maybe there's like an archiving strategy. What needs to move to like a different data storage tier that, so that you're not, paying, top dollar for data that you're probably not accessing, very often. So I've seen that, being overlooked. Even some other things, related to storage is basically like a lot of, abandoned, like snapshots and things like that. One thing that typically happens within like a scenario is like, okay, even in the non-prod environments, engineers might spin up something. Maybe they're doing something in dev or testing out something, a proof of concept, and they have maybe like an EC2, and then they got all the storage, but then they go to the, okay, yeah, we're done. Let me just terminate the EC2. Well, they're leaving the snapshots behind, and that begins to build up over time, and then now you have this accrual of costs that are building up. I like to call those like zombie assets, because I feel like a zombie hunter, going to like track down these things. And there's a way to automate that process as well, to, as far as cleanup. So there's a way to capture that. But this all goes back to, how do you know if you can delete it or not? Do you need these snapshots or not? Is there an archive strategy? So it goes back to asking those questions when you want, someone from operations to actually take action. So it's like, okay, well, let's actually, think through that, document it, and actually have that process in place. So there's things like that. When it comes to pricing models, taking a look at, tiered, like, what's your tier storage strategy, when you consider, what's the life cycle of your data. And then some other factors to look into, which and this will be more of like a mature more of a maturity, like, if you've done everything else properly and you're still looking to optimize even further, then this would be like looking at like data compression or deduplication of data, things like that. So this is where you can really be operating a little bit more efficiently in there. Those are all options that organizations can address. But what I recommend is just, like, taking those fundamental steps in the beginning, looking at, really laying out what is that life cycle management process, what's that archive strategy, things like that should be considered.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying there around good planning, good documentation, because if you know what's there and you know what's happening, you can control it. Because we all have the horror stories. I remember one weekend, I'll not name the company, but the engineers left a cloud instance running $47,000 later. wasn't even. I forgot to ask them, did they take the snapshots off afterwards? Rather expensive weekend.
Yeah, yeah. Those are those sticker shock type of anomalies that pop up. And yeah, I think everyone has experienced that in some form or another, and definitely has happened within companies. And yeah, that's where, and that's even the collaboration. There's possibly, some type of automated tools that can help catch anomalies, but also, having a really good monitoring system, alerts in place, that you could catch any type of, like, spikes in workloads and things like that. But yeah, those are stories that it gets to the top of leadership, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, now all of a sudden there's a heavy demand for FinOps, and, like, okay, we need to get control of cost. So it creates this rapid attention to towards cost, which is pretty funny and interesting.
All the stuff that should have been done. But as someone once said to me, Brian, never waste a good crisis. So if you want
Yeah.
FinOps, create one. Brian, every business is aiming to become AI driven. I think it's fair to say, with generative AI at the top of that list. That's going to have an impact on cloud, on infrastructure budgets, on IO. What should companies be doing now in regard to their cloud strategy, knowing that this is coming?
Yeah, I mean, that is literally like a bleeding edge, kind of question. You know what I mean? That's companies are looking to adopt it fast. I mean, everything that has changed over this past year is truly amazing. And I would say, from myself, when I take a step back, like I said, I've been around since the dot-com boom, and I've seen things, you know, what it takes, to create automation, or to get systems to talk to each other. Now you fast forward to today, and the power of what we have at our fingertips, and now with the power of AI capabilities, that it's truly amazing. I have a lot of thoughts around that. I think, as it relates to what organizations should be thinking about, and what I'm already seeing within the group, because I'm plugged in within the FinOps Foundation working groups, and you can see enterprise organizations in the summits asking the same questions, which is, understanding the pricing models related to AI. I think there's a rapid adoption that's happening without fully understanding the compute costs that are associated with it. So So they're adopting faster, and I think they're going to be like reactive to the costs that are coming. So it's probably, raising the importance of, wanting to have more of a solid, FinOps foundation to help with that. So there's not that much of a sticker shock that comes into play. But what organizations, the ones that do have it on the radar, they are looking to build out, those pricing models and generating forecasts on what they can anticipate related to to AI, compute costs and things like that. But I would say, on the flip side, even though there's costs associated with it, there's definitely a lot of business value that comes with it as well. And especially, if you're mentioning, generative AI, the ability of which it can create, that is creating code, that is creating these automations, and it's basically allowing you to do more with less, and less meaning, less labor. It's creating these efficiencies, which means companies are being more productive, but not needing as many people to achieve that level of productivity. And so that's bringing in bigger value. And just like how the use of cloud, where I mean, this is the real reason why the importance of FinOps has really spurred up over these past 2-3 years. You combine um, economic uncertainty, and then the adoption of organizations moving into the cloud. It just creates this formula for, like, okay, we need a strategy around FinOps, and we got to get a handle on this, for all these reasons. And I think AI is, going through that same, that same path. But the value that's coming with it is greater than the concern. They're thinking about the cost, but I think the upside of the value that is coming with, they are pretty much assuming that it's going to more than cover the costs that are associated with it. But even with that being said, there's still going to be a need to have to have a plan to address that for sure.
I suppose then that leads to bigger question, do you see your cloud as a cost or do you see your cloud as a value driver? And the answer is
Yeah.
it probably depends on the firm and the results that you're getting. And that's where I'm that fan of FinOps, where all of a sudden when everything's transparent, then you can answer that question. So you can remove the bits that aren't adding value, pop in the bits that are, and then double down on those.
Yeah.
Brian, though, for today, last question, if you don't mind. What are the best strategies overall and in summary that you would recommend for companies that are migrating to the cloud, or they're adjusting their cloud strategies to get the best bang for the buck, knowing what's coming in terms of data sovereignty, if I can remember to pronounce that right, generative AI, the numbers of applications that are all moving to the cloud that you really want to grasp, the fact that these are all in multi-hybrid cloud environments, the fact that you will have, tactically some AWS, some IBM cloud, some Azure and whatever else because of acquisitions, size of companies, best products, best applications. It's a pure melting pot. So if you can distill down your best advices, what would you be saying to companies when it comes to creating a really effective, cost-effective, operationally wonderful cloud-based strategy? If I can get you to do that in a couple of minutes or less.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, the adoption of FinOps is a journey, and along with the cloud adoption. So as a first, I would say, and I see most organizations that are planning their cloud adoption or a major migration. They should definitely be planning FinOps in parallel. And thankfully, I've seen organizations, and I've been a part of engagements where, yeah, the CTO or CIO is like making the decisions to make that a priority to go along with their cloud adoption or major migration efforts. The the awesome thing is like I've been fortunate to work with different enterprises at different phases of their cloud journey. So organizations that have been in the planning phase, organizations that maybe are in the middle of their cloud migration effort and they're experiencing what we call bubble costs, meaning like they have provisioned in the cloud, but they still have resources on prem, and there's bubble costs, and you got leadership asking, "Hey, I thought things are going to be cheaper in the cloud, but we're paying more. What's going on?" And organizations at that phase are typically looking for some quick cost takeout, but there's also still some fundamental steps to go through. And then as organizations get towards the other tail end, if they're now reaching a majority in the cloud, that's where they're now thinking about policy and governance and automation and a way to like, okay, how do we maintain operational efficiency? Cost is not just a one-time event. Like, how do we keep this going efficiently? And those are some of the things, and that's where like hopefully you have a solid target operating model, things like that that are in place to help move that forward. And then looking for tools and accelerators to really take that and carry that forward. So that's number one. And really, what I described going through that, there's like four phases that an enterprise would want to go through. So I view it as like as a first phase, visualization, transparency, having those key stakeholders that at least now have the capability to visualize, you know, what do they own, what do they spend month to month, and so on. That's one of the key fundamental steps. Then the second one is optimize. Now that we know what we're spending, let's see what we can actually begin to optimize on. If there's those, snapshots, abandoned snapshots, let's get rid of those. And now we saved a chunk of money. If there's, when we talk about purchasing effectiveness, okay, we're paying on demand here. Maybe there's some savings plans or RIs that we can do, or maybe make use of spot pricing, and we can now immediately save 30% or 50% or something like that by making a commitment. And so there's things like that. And then, utilization, you know, basically, I like the analogies. There's different optimization scenarios. Um, one is like, for a workload, sometimes if we don't have a proper, intake, process, and that should have like a standard, workload. Some people are buying the premium, they're purchasing a Lamborghini to do the job of what a Toyota could get away with or something, right? So it's things like that that are happening, and there's optimization opportunities going forward. But I would say as a third recommendation, and this will touch on how do you bring all that multi-cloud together. I think this was announced it was announced last month. Um, the Focus standard, which was released by the FinOps Foundation. Now, Focus is an acronym. It stands for FinOps Cost and Usage Specification. And this, the FinOps Foundation, it's a nonprofit part of the Linux Foundation, but it's community driven. So, like I said, I'm a part of the working group, but there's also so many other contributors from all enterprises. So AWS is a member, Microsoft Azure, GCP, but then you got other, big firms, and then also what we call practitioner companies. So like other enterprises of like part of the, Fortune 50 or Fortune 500, their their FinOps practitioners are also involved. But to make a long story short, what the focus specifications are, it's it's establishing the very first common data model standard for cloud billing data. AWS has their own, format and their own names of billing data. Azure has their own, GCP has their own, and you mentioned IBM Cloud, all of them have their own. Well, if one, we're talking about how do you get visibility, and then all of a sudden if we have all these things, if we don't have a common data model, then there's a way, you have to like create all these unique things. But what the community is creating, and they announced this last month, it was like November November 16th, I think it was announced, was this focused common data model. And there's also going to be like transformation templates to be able to take, your AWS to now transform that into a focus standard. Take your Azure data, transform that into a focus standard. So now, if you're enterprise and you're listening, what you'd want to do right now, because this is literally, just announced maybe about 2 weeks ago, that you want to start looking to establish this common data model within your own enterprise, because that's what you can begin to build upon in the future going forward, because now you can have all your reporting and all your apps having the dependency on this common data model that's going to stay pretty solid. And it's not just you as an individual creating something that you think is solid, even though you probably do a good job, but this is led by the industry. And not only led by the industry, but you got AWS working towards it and saying, yes, with our billing data, we're going to transform it to go to this common data model. We're going to make that ability to transform that data. Azure, the same way. So the CSPs, the cloud service providers, are making that enabled. So it's one of the recent news that came out. I'm moving forward with it. I think it's one of the best things that can happen for the industry because of that scenario that you talked about. All these different providers. How do you deal with it? It seems like a mess. This is what within the industry. This is what was announced about 2 weeks ago, and it finally came out. So version 1.0. So I'd say to for the audience listening, if you go to focus.finops.org. So it's focus.finops.org, and you'll be able to read about it and download the actual specifications. And then there's also a link to like a GitHub where they'll have like templates and things like that. And then I think there's future things that are coming as far as template queries for use cases and different things like that. But it's something that the industry is going to continue to build upon.
Wow, a lot happening. It's an exciting space, I have to say. And I think cloud's going to get bigger. I've seen some figures from McKinsey that talked about, $1 trillion in spend in the next couple of years. And I sometimes wonder, is that actually enough? And it's interesting as well. We talk about FinOps and we talk about the cost of things. I think we should be talking about the value of things. And again, it's very interesting to hear CEOs, CTOs, CPOs, CFOs, there isn't enough O's in the world, beginning with C, talking about the cost of these things. But on-prem storage has always cost money as well. Cloud has exposed the cost of storage. I think if there was a FinOps for internal as well, and that had existed years ago, I think people might be very shocked by what they're spending their money on. But let's see where we can get the value. And cloud, you certainly can. Brian, if people want to find out a little bit more about you, how do they go about doing that, sir?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say definitely look me up on LinkedIn. So Brian McCumber on LinkedIn, you should be able to find me there. Do a search on Tech Money Talks, a search with Tech Money, and I think you'll find my podcast. And then one other thing that I wanted to offer to your audience, you do a search on Power BI for FinOps. This typically sells for $58 on Amazon, and I want to give the book away for free to your audience. So as a gift, I'd say you can go to finopspowerbi.com, and you can get a copy of the free book here. Now the cool thing about it was, like, I remember I was speaking at a Flexera conference, and the director there, it was a great testimonial. He was actually showing the book, but he had the book with like a bunch of tabs in there. And he's like, every one of these will help me with my job today. And I was like, wow, that's a great testimonial for sure. And what it allows people to do, because I saw that it was a gap in the industry, the usage of Power BI, and Power BI itself as a business intelligence tool. It's been ranked by Gartner 16 years in a row as the best BI tool to use. Big enterprises like Walmart use it exclusively. It is powerful. There is a way to do automations and actionable things. It's not just reports and dashboards. It's now integrated with generative AI and Copilot and all that stuff. And so I included that in the book, and the stuff that we talked about here today, as far as KPIs and right sizing, all that kind of recommendations, a way to visualize it. It's outlined in the book on how to do that with Power BI. So really cool stuff. If the audience is interested in this space, then I think it'll be great for them.
Wonderful. And I say this gorgeously, cheap at that price. I've worked in two businesses running TBM and FinOps functions. One, we saved 30 million, reinvested in the business and saved a chunk of change. And one, we saved 20 million. So $57 versus that is not a lot of money. Brian, thank you so much indeed. I wish you every success. Folks, thank you so much for joining in today. Until we get to our next talk, have a wonderful day.